Discipleship Intensive, Wise Financial Stewardship at the top. This will also double as like an agenda for the evening, so it'll help keep me honest to a couple of these breaks that we're going to take. Just to give you an overview of where we're headed for the evening. Super thankful, super excited to be able to just connect with you guys on this specific topic. I feel like the Lord was very gracious to me, giving me a really strong background with my parents on what this looks like, and just really proud to be just a recipient of God's grace in that way to demonstrate what both wise financial stewardship and wild generosity looks like. So I've seen a lot of that firsthand. Recognize that is likely not the case for many people in this room. We just had open up questions about what that did look like in the past, and maybe that was some of your stories. For a lot of the stories that I'm hearing and have heard, that is not where we're starting. And so I just want to give everyone kind of a comfort level, like whatever you're coming into with today is great. Like, we're really glad that you're here, and we're going to try to orient this around a couple of things. Number one, we're going to orient this around what does the Bible say about wise financial stewardship. And so we're going to start with that perspective in our first session. It's going to be a bit of a Bible drill, so if you got your phone or you got your Bible, we're going to be in a bunch of different verses. It's not going to really be me teaching much of anything. Just going to be reading God's Word and going, okay, that's what it says. So the Word of the Lord will teach for itself when it comes to what some of these practices and theology of wise financial stewardship might look like. And then after that, we're going to break for dinner. Dinner's here. I'm not exactly sure about that. That's the time I have set aside on the agenda for that. So I think that should be around the time we're going to break for dinner. We're going to come back, and then we're going to get into some really practical things. So we're going to move from the theology to a practice and say, okay, what are some helpful habits that we could take a look at that can lead us towards wise financial stewardship? And I'll have an open group Q&A at the end of that time, and we'll finish that time out by filling out this kind of self-assessment quiz here. So feel free to look ahead if you want to, but what we'll do with that'll kind of end the second session. So you'll turn that into your table host, we'll take a little break, then we'll come back, and then it's just going to be Q&A with your table host. So we'll use those kind of self-assessments as a guide for some helpful next steps for hopefully each individual here in the room of what you could personally take away and say, hey, this could be a really good next step for me when it comes to these certain areas. So that's the goal. Just good theology, some helpful overview, practical habits that we can all employ, and then some deep dive personal next steps for each person in that format. So everyone on the same page with that? Feel good with that? Okay. Proverbs 3:9. You can go ahead and open there. We're going to start there. It's going to be what the theme of the evening is based out of. Proverbs 3:9. This is one that the Lord has really been, not just this verse, but the whole first part of Proverbs 3, the Lord has really been working on me over the past couple of years on. There's just a significant amount of wisdom in multiple areas of life wrapped up in this first part of Proverbs. But Proverbs 3, 9, and 10 says this: honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. 3:9. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruit of all your crops. I'm hoping for the first part of tonight, we could just take a look at what honoring the Lord with our wealth looks like. And certainly based on world standards, I mean, we could describe wealth in many ways, but certainly based on the standards of the vast majority of the world, everyone here is very wealthy. We've all been given so much, not only in terms of spiritual blessings by the Lord, but truly in terms of material blessings. We could just all name them, but we understand that as a basic principle to be true about us. We've been incredibly blessed, and what does it look like to honor the Lord with our wealth? Kind of like what we talked about in the dating and sex and relationships, honoring the Lord is not like a line. Like, you do these things, I'm honoring the Lord. You do these things, necessarily, you're not. It's more of a direction that we're pursuing of it's a lifelong pursuit of how can I honor the Lord with what he's given me, with what he continues to give me. Like, as I take a next step perhaps into my financial journey, and what can it look like to continue to honor the Lord, to put the Lord first, to give him, as Proverbs describes, the first fruits. That's like our top priority. What are we doing to think about how we can be generous and honor the Lord with the things that he's given us. So we'll talk about a couple of things of like what does honoring the Lord look like as we see throughout Scripture. Before we get there though, just want to, I think the Lord brought this verse to me this week, John 10:10, and so I wanted to highlight that for everyone before we get going. John 10:10 says this, and I think it sets up our conversation really well. It says, "The thief comes only to steal and to kill and to destroy, but I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." The thief comes to steal and to kill and destroy, but I have come, this is Jesus, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. I mean, when it comes to lots of things, but certainly when it comes to finances, we have the choice between lies and life a lot. We have the choice between lies and life. And one of the main lies that we have the choice to take or to not take is that I have to have fill in the blank to be happy. Like, I have to have more, I have to have this, I need this specific thing, and this needs to be a part of my life in order for me to feel a certain way. Like, I need more to be happy. And while I would say, like, maybe many of you in this room are like, I wouldn't say that. Like, I'm more mature. I know that that's not the case. We might voice that, but we vote with our credit card against that ideology quite often. Like, every time we swipe the card, we're actually voting for a different ideology than what we say we would believe is true. We're saying, actually, this thing is something that I value, even though it's not I might not have the money to take that next step. Or I could allocate this in a different way, but I'm going to choose this because I think it's going to bring me this level or this layer of happiness. So I think that lie is more entrenched in us than what we think it actually is. And so I just want to encourage us. The Bible is clear on things that lead to life when it comes to wise financial stewardship. And we have the opportunity to make decisions that either choose lies or choose life pretty regularly. Very often on a daily basis, we have the opportunity to make these choices. And so, I just want to set us up with that framework or that picture, that it's not just like, well, I'm going out to do this. Like, it's not a big deal. These things are a really big deal because they impact our heart. And not choosing a direction is choosing a direction when it comes to financial stewardship. And so, I want to set that up as a framework for the conversation to take a look at, for the first part of our chat, 4 different things that God is honored by with our finances. And these will come straight from Scripture. So we're going to actually have tables. I'm going to, like this table over here, you guys are going to be responsible for the first 4 verses. God is honored when I acknowledge him as provider. Okay, so if y'all can look that up, I'll call on people. We're just going to read these verses out loud and hear what the word of the Lord has to say. Both you tables can be in charge of that. I think we have about maybe 8 or so. So whoever wants to find whatever verses can do that, but y'all be responsible for those. This table over here, God is honored when I worship the giver over his gifts. So y'all look up those verses, please, and I'll call on you for those. Y'all are God is honored when I manage the gifts he's given me wisely. Actually, both of you are the two tables are that. And then this circle right here and you table in the back, God is honored when I display joyful generosity. Okay, so y'all kind of divvy up those verses. Whoever wants to read them can read them. But we're going to listen to them. We're going to listen to this table over here first, and we talk about the first one over here. God is honored when I acknowledge Him as the provider.
Psalm 24 doesn't have.
Sorry, that's a typo. It's verse 1. It's verse 1. That's my bad.
Okay. Make sure you actually read the Bible. Right?
Yeah.
First quick pass.
Okay. All right. Hey, we're not going to read.
The earth and everything in it, the world and its inhabitants belongs to the Lord.
Love it. James 1:17.
Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change.
Love it. Job 41:11.
Who confronted me that I should repay him? Everything under heaven belongs to me.
Everything under heaven belongs to the Lord. 1 Samuel 2:7.
The Lord brings poverty and gives wealth. He humbles and he exalts.
Can you read that one more time? That's a good one.
The Lord brings poverty and gives wealth. He humbles and he exalts.
So what does it mean to honor the Lord with our wealth? The first thing, God is honored when we acknowledge that He is the provider of all things. So here's when things get really dangerous for us. When you ask the question, like, what do I want to do with my money? Okay? That question is not theologically accurate. The question is, what can I do with the gifts that God has given me? What can I do with the Lord's money? Right? This is not our money that we're making. It's the Lord's money that we're managing. We see the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. Everything good comes from the Lord. Everything under heaven and earth belongs to the Lord. It's the Lord who gives wealth. It's the Lord who gives poverty. And in all things, the Lord will be exalted. Like everything we have, this is like top positional framework of wise financial stewardship, is that it's not yours. It's not yours. It's the Lord's. And so you're only asked, what can you do with what the Lord has given you and is giving you, right? And we'll talk about some of those things here in the next couple of points. But yeah, that's top positional theological framework. Everything is the Lord's. And so we don't operate from a closed hand perspective. We operate with a hands lifted up. Lord, this is all yours. What do you want me to do with this and what you've given me? All right, super important that we have that perspective to start out, because that's where everything else will flow from there. You'll think differently. Kind of like the sermon this morning. Like you will be able to listen to the Lord differently if you're in a posture of worship. Well, in the same way, you'll be able to position how you steward, how you give, how you spend things differently if your initial posture is, it's yours, Lord. Like, have you ever been in a spot where you're responsible for managing someone else's money? Like, or maybe that's your job. Yeah, nods from Eric Casillas over there. Like, you think about it differently when it's someone else's, not yours. Like, you're accountable. You're responsible for that. In the same way, we are accountable. We are responsible for the things that the Lord has given us. And so that's where we start. God is going to be honored when we acknowledge that He is the provider of all things, and that all things are His. All right, God is honored when I worship the giver over the gifts. Like, you can't read that, and it's so relevant. It's so practical to things that we all, maybe we're feeling right now, maybe we felt in the past. Like, everyone knows the feeling of feeling this way, and yet this passage is such a hard check to say, hey, the Lord's got you. Like, seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and then all of these things are additional. All these things will be added there. But the first priority is over-prioritizing, seeking the things of this world, or prioritizing our career, prioritizing saving extra, investing over what the Lord would have us do with those things. It's a good chance to stop and check our hearts and ask about that. Let's go to God is honored when I manage the gifts He's given me wisely. This is these two tables here?
Yeah.
Okay. Proverbs.
Matthew 25.
Matthew 25, 14 through 30.
For it would be like a man going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now, after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here, I have made 5 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he also, who had the 2 talents, came forward, saying, Master, you delivered me 2 talents. Here, I have made 2 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. He also, who had received the 1 talent, came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, you have what is yours. But his master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown, and gather where I scattered no seed? But then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has the 10 talents. For to everyone who has will be given, and he will have in abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Great reading. Thank you. This one I'd encourage you to go back and read back through, because there's some really specific and pretty harsh language around the concept of this. God is honored when we acknowledge him as provider. God is honored when I worship the giver over his gifts. Sometimes I have seen a tendency to just stop there and to just go, this idea of like, God, you've got it. Like, you're going to provide. You've got everything that's taken care of. Like, I don't, like you're going to be a good God and give to me. And we kind of stop there. And while those things are true, there are other things that are also true that the scripture teaches us about the importance of stewardship and the importance of appropriately managing the gifts and the resources that God has given us. So I think it's very dangerous when we throw up our hands and just say, Lord, you've got this. I can sit back and just wait for you to provide. Listen to the language of that passage in the parable that Jesus is teaching there. It's very specific. He says, I have an expectation that you're going to manage what I've given you wisely and even seek to grow that. And it calls the servant who doesn't slothful and wicked. Okay, so there is onus on us in Scripture to manage what the Lord has given us wisely. All right, and we're going to see a couple of Proverbs examples of that, but I wanted to lead out with that because I think that's a fantastic illustration, not only financially, but let's talk about like spiritual gifts and other talents. Like the question I would say is, what are you doing to leverage any resource that the Lord has given you for the benefit of the kingdom? Put that back to the Lord and say, how can I leverage this for you? And so let's read a couple other verses. Proverbs 21:5. Here's a good one.
The plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty.
Plans of the diligent lead to abundance, lead to profit. Proverbs 10:4.
I got that one. Lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth.
Love it. Proverbs 21:20.
Precious treasure and oil are in the dwelling of a wise person, but a fool consumes them.
Yeah, that proverb is saying it's wise to save. Like it's wise to store. It's good to put something away for a rainy day. Okay? Proverbs 22:7.
The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is the slave of the lender.
Rich rules over the poor. The borrower is slave to the lender. You've been in debt. You are in debt. You feel the weight of that. Like you know, you're under the ownership. Your finances are under the ownership of not you. So that there's some very practical wisdom in these proverbs. Proverbs 13:22.
A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, but the sinner's wealth is laid up for the righteous.
Man, I love the idea of this because it makes money not just about me. Obviously, it's a decision that you make with you and the Lord and how you steward that. But this proverb is saying, hey, a good man, college ladies, a good man will be thinking about how he stewards his finances well to save up for his children, his children's children, like setting someone else up in a position to succeed, not just himself, and making those decisions right now. What an excellent indicator of wisdom and how that person can operate. And even I think about the language in Timothy that it calls like deacons and elders to, of managing your household well. Like a wise person knows how to manage the things of their household well, including their finances. And so what we see here with this selection of verses is God is honored when we manage, when we steward the gifts that he's given to us wisely. So we have a responsibility, not just to sit back and say, Lord, you've got it, Lord, you're going to provide. We have a responsibility to manage, to be diligent was a word that was used, to not be hasty, to not be lazy. These are all actions that we can take with the brain that God has given us to lead to diligence, to lead to abundance, to lead to profit, to leave a legacy for our children's children. Okay? So, last one, God is honored when I display joyful generosity. And we'll start with Mark 10:45.
For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many.
I'm going to pause there for just a second. Mark 10:45. Even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. This is one of the 6 main verses hanging on the Strong Family Principle board under give generously. Like we have family principle number 2 on the big board is give generously, and this is the key verse for it. Not necessarily because it says anything about what to do with our money, but because it tells us that God is a giving God. Like John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave. Like Christians have the number one example of generosity in the history of the world, right? A God who came down to us and to make a way for us to be back with him, gave his own life. If we are Christ followers, Christians meaning Christ followers, and we are following after Christ, like how could we not become more progressively generous people? That's who our God is. He gives every good gift comes from God. The earth is the Lord's. Like we've read all these verses about the Lord giving, the Lord giving, the Lord giving. Like, how could we not have our hearts progress more towards that if we're pursuing the Lord? Because that's who he is. And so the Lord is pleased when we're displaying and we're moving towards generosity because that's his heart. His heart is generosity. So I wanted to pause there, give an extra little shout out to that verse. 2 Corinthians 9:7.
So let each one give as he purposes in his heart, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver.
Oh, God loves a cheerful giver. Not, what are the 2 words it says there? Not grudging or
Necessity.
not out of grudge or necessity. Not like, it's my time to give. God loves a cheerful giver. Man, God loves it when our heart posture is like his heart posture, which is I give freely. And I love to be able to do that. Proverbs 19:17.
Whoever is generous to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will repay him for his deed.
Man, we see that? We see that, like, by extension of us joyfully loving and serving other people, it's like directly serving the Lord. I think that verse is really, really powerful. And then wrap it up with our theme verse for the evening, Proverbs 3:9.
Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce.
Honor the Lord. The Lord is honored when we give. We not just give begrudgingly, not give out of compulsion, but we give out of a joyful generosity, and we give our first fruits. So, yeah, what does it look like to honor the Lord? It starts with an acknowledgement that He is the giver of all things. He is the provider of that, and it's all His. And we move down to, yes, it is all His, and we need to orient our hearts rightly. We need to orient our hearts correctly around worshiping the Lord as the giver of gifts and not worshiping the gifts themselves. Not pursuing things that we think are going to make us happy, believing the lies instead of choosing life. Jesus is that life, and we have all we need in the Lord. And so when we choose to prioritize anything, a specific thing, money, job, anything that's going to lead us to material blessing, then we are over the Lord, then we are out of priority with where we should be. God is honored when we manage the things that He's given us. There's a personal responsibility to how we steward what the Lord has given to us. And then God is honored when we display joyful generosity. For this last part, I want to ask Chris to come on up here. Chris is in a unique seat because he gets to see joyful generosity in action frequently. And so I just wanted to have him share some of the ways that he's seen that be a huge impact.
Yes. Thanks, Mark. Also, just one other kind of framing thought that I wanted to share. Part of what we're wanting to do at Discipleship Intensives, and what I think Mark has just done a really great job of, is we want to highlight like God's good design of a particular subject. And so when you think about money, I know even some of the conversations perhaps at your table was like, money was like this, or money was like this, or I feel really uncomfortable when I talk about money. And the Bible's, God's not uncomfortable talking about it. And that happens when we have a biblical framework for how to think about money. And so, what Mark has just done, in a theological sense, is provided us with a biblical theology of stewardship and finances. This is just a really great snapshot of how we, as Christians, should be thinking about money. And so that last part on God is honored when we display joyful generosity. There's certainly lots more Bible verses for all of these main ideas. But Mark and I were talking, I was like, man, I'd love to just kind of highlight a few different ways in which the Lord has allowed some really incredible things to take place through generosity in our church family. And so probably one of the more recent ones that was really significant was there was a family that we met in a car parked in the Travis parking lot that didn't have air conditioning. It was a family of 6. It was in the middle, it was right at the end of July, first week of August, so still 110 degrees, 3 of them were children, and that was their home. They had no place to stay. They were staying in a car, in a van that had no AC. That need got heard by several in our church family, and our church just rallied around this family, providing time resources, providing some kind of social work resources, but also providing incredible, generous financial resources for their life. And that family now is in long-term housing, has a van that someone in our church gave to them that has working AC, and is now like fully functioning in a residence, and their kids, because they go to Travis Elementary, spoken with the principal, Scott Massini at Travis, and he said, Chris, it's just like, can't tell you the difference in those kids and how they're functioning in school from before and after. And that's the power of generosity. In a far more eternal sense, this is what the gospel has done with our lives, right? Like we were lost and dead, and through God's generosity, He made us alive. On a bit more of like a structural example, I think about several in here that have been interns in our church, and when we first started, our internship was a paid role as we were helping to launch our college ministry and launch a variety of ministries in our church. I think about Joe Grogan, And because of the generosity of our church family, we were able to kind of pour fuel into the fire of starting a college ministry at Texas State that now has 6 different house churches meeting throughout the week with like 60 to 80 different college students. While students like Joe and Haley and Jaden have had the experience of getting to experience church leadership while also doing that in a context as a part-time job. I think turning up the heat on that a little bit, you see our residency where Jaden and previous Jordan Matthews have served, and now Haley Arnold is preparing to come on. Our church provides $500 a month towards that residency program, and then they're responsible for support raising the rest outside of our context. But through that, I mean, just think about, I would imagine 80 to 90% of us in the room could talk about ways in which the Lord has used Jordan and Jaden and Haley in our own lives to minister to us, to help provide for needs in our lives for a variety of things. And they've gotten to be equipped and developed in learning what it looks like to be a minister of the Lord and a leader in his church. And so, and then again, now preparing to plant a church with the Vine. And our church recently committed that we're going to be giving $1,500 a month to help support the beginning of the Vine. And that was honestly, like, working with the finance team, that was a bit of a faith step. Like, we're not some big mega church that's just like, yeah, we can write these huge checks to go plant churches. And $1,500 for a month for a church our size is a big check. And that same week that the finance team decided, yeah, this is what we're going to do, was I got a phone call from one of our outside network supporters. They said, hey, Chris, we don't do this ever, but we want to extend your giving, our support to your church for an additional year. It was literally the month we were rolling off of funding, which was $1,000 a month. And they said, we literally, like, don't tell your other church planting friends, because we don't do this. But we've heard about what God's doing with the well, and we want to continue supporting you guys for an additional year at $1,000 a month. And I could tell you 100 more of those stories. But I wanted you to hear just some of what God has done and is doing because of the faithfulness of our church family to give. I would also just tell you our church family exists because people that aren't a part of our church family have given generously towards the well. There are still months where outside giving from organizations or random people is actually higher than inside giving in our church. And we're hoping that shifts here this year. But there's some random lady in Colorado. I met her one time. And she heard about what God was doing in San Marcos. She writes us a $1,200 check every month. Some random lady in Colorado. She's not a part of this church. She just loves the Lord. And I guess she and her husband have a good amount of money. But they just bless our church family. There's a new church in Kyle that exists because there's some random lady in Oklahoma that writes them an $8,000 check every month. Wow. That's a car. That's like well, not anymore, but when I was a child, that was a car. Like, that's a Derek Sokola car. So, man, I'm rolling. And so, Derek's over here. Yeah, kudos for Mark. And so, what I hope to do in part is paint a vision of what could be possible. I want you to think about all that the Lord is going to entrust to your life and what could be possible within the kingdom of God if we opened our hands and said, hey, God, it's all yours anyway. Let's go crazy and see what you can do. But as Mark's going to come back after our dinner break here, that is not possible when you're a slave to the lender. Most of these people, all the ones I know personally, are able to do that because they're debt-free. And so they're free to live radically generous because they're not a slave to their finances. Their finances are actually free to be a vessel of joy and generosity for the kingdom because they don't have their hands tied behind car payments and credit cards. They're free to be wildly generous. And so part of our hope for tonight is that we would be able to develop some skills and tools that we also could walk in freedom financially so that we could be generous. And so I've got a bit of like a fun announcement after some of the tools at the end about how there's one of our ministry partners I'll just share, one of our ministry partners has heard about this evening and wants to help encourage generosity. And so I'll share more about that at the end of like practically what that'll look like. But the short version is someone has said, hey, we want to match $2,500 of giving that happens tonight, so that if you don't have a habit of giving regularly, man, we really do want you to do that. So much so that we're going to say, hey, we'll double your gift up to $2,500 tonight. And that's not like a, hey, get in on the deal now. But we really want to put our money where our mouth is. To say, hey, like, we believe that there is joy in giving so much that we want to, this is what the kingdom does. It doubles your investment. Over and over and over again. You'll find that. Just listen to Janine's story from this morning. What happened? She said, I'm going to trust God with this little bedroom. And now she's got a whole orchard of fruitfulness from that investment. And so that's where we hope to get to, but we got to work through the tools and such first. So one other brief caveat, and then we'll break for dinner. What this talk doesn't include is kind of an expanded theological discussion about the direction of our giving. When we first planted the well, I'll confess I was underdeveloped on a theology of giving. And frankly, I was scared to talk about tithing because of a preconceived notion that people don't like pastors to talk about money. And so I was like, I already had enough insecurity planting a church. I didn't want to add that to the list. And so I was just like, hey, give if you like, you know. And then I just realized, like, hey, God talks about this a lot. I should probably figure out what I believe the Bible teaches on giving. And specifically about giving to the local church. And so, as I do sometimes when I get theological questions, I just kind of hide in a closet, read a bunch of books, and study the Bible, and then crank out a paper. And so, I actually wrote a paper for our church family on God's good design of giving. And here's just my personal conviction as I've studied the scriptures. That God's good design of giving does rightly prioritize the local church. Because that, from the day of Pentecost, has been God's plan A. But prior to Pentecost, what you saw was God prioritized the worship of himself. And he did that monetarily. And so all the way back in the Old Testament, he had a whole people called the Levites, and they were able to do what they did, which was present all the things necessary for God to be worshipped. They were free to be able to do that financially because the rest of the tribes gave to make that possible. Which was in some ways a precursor to the practice in the New Testament of giving generously to your local church for the work of the kingdom. And so it is my personal conviction, not just because I'm a pastor of a church, that we should give our best gift to the local church. It is actually my personal conviction that a great goal and starting point is to give 10% of your income to the local church. Amen. Whoa, Chris. And you're like, how do you do that? And why? Why local church? Why not my missionary friends like Joe and Haley and Jake and all the people that we're trying to help support raising our church family? You read the paper for further discussion or read the rest of the New Testament, you will see Jesus has a unique heart for his church. And you might say, well, Joe is the church. Joe is a member of the church. She is not the church in and of herself. This is the church. It is a organized people of God filled with his Spirit for worship and for mission. And so if you're like, hey, I don't know if I agree with that, I would genuinely love to have that chat with you. But one of the things that we're praying for our church family is that we would mature in the area of giving generously to the local church. Plainly because it's an area where we need to mature as a church family. But also I could tell you lots more stories of what God has done through generosity to this church for the blessing of this city, and now the blessing of another city. And so through that, we then also get to bless missionaries and goers and senders and things like this. And so, just some other theological discussion for that on the context of generosity. Now my turn has gone too long. And it's time for dinner. So, so how dinner's going to work is you're going to go and get dinner, bring it back in here, and fill out your self-assessment. No, that's not what's happening. Mark, back to you. I'm all done with my part.
Just go and get your dinner, and then you want to eat back in here? So,
Yeah. You can eat in here.
So we'll eat back in here, and then we'll get going in like 10 minutes again. Maybe while you're finishing up dinner or something, maybe 15, depending on how long it takes.
Everybody's looking at me like, oh. And I was like 20. One thing that stood out most.
But also trying to create space for
Jordan, this year?
I'm from San Antonio, and then you were asking for I'm in exercise in charge, so when it's over, I'm trying to.
All right, as soon as Lawrence is down, where you going?
I was like following my best friend here, so I just like pick whatever looks cool. But I think it's what I'm sitting here. I'll see you change for a while. But I talked to my dad, I talked to Chris, I talked to
All right, we're going to get going. Start out with our second session in my timer up here. Okay, we got to get booking. Next break's going to be smaller and smaller. Okay, so first session we wanted to do is provide an overview, kind of a theological look at what is honoring the Lord with our finances look like. And we'll start with that framework before we get to any tips, because that's really going to guide everything. And we don't have that as a foundation of how we view our finances, or by our finances I mean the gifts that the Lord has given us to steward wisely. Then some of these practices, these habits, these very practical things that we're going to talk about could be practiced from a wrong place, in a wrong position. More so like how can I maximize, how can I accumulate, how can I build things up for me, as opposed to starting with the framework of it's all the Lord's. Lord, what would you have me do with this money that is already yours, that you've given me to manage? So we needed that foundation, but in the theme of honoring the Lord through wise management of the things that He's going to give us, we wanted to have a session that was very practical about some things that we can do to help wisely steward the gifts that the Lord has given to us. And so, a little bit of preface before we dive into some of this. I would say that, I know just because of the diversity of people that are in here, there are a lot of financial backgrounds and also places that people are at financially here in this room. And so what this is going to be is more of a Finance 101 chat about some habits that are broadly applicable to everyone, right? So from the most financially advanced of us to I don't even know where to start. These habits will be applicable across that spectrum. And I liken this to whether you are playing t-ball or whether or not you're playing for the Astros, you still have to know how to throw, catch, and hit. Okay? The basics do not change. There are some very basic fundamentals. Now, your execution of those may change and should change as you get more advanced in your ability to play baseball. Maybe there might be some additional methodologies that you can implement that can be helpful, but the basics do not change. Okay? The basics of personal finance really do not change. There are some very practical habits that you can implement and be consistent in that will lead to success and wise stewardship of the things that the Lord's given you. So we're going to cover some of those habits more broadly, and then the goal would be to have a chance in the next session with your table host to get to some Q&As about where am I at on that spectrum and how can I use some of those habits specifically to maybe get started or to enhance where I'm already at. Things like that, so we can kind of be where you're at and you can leave with something that's personal and practical to you. But just want to let you know, if you're here like, Mark, what are your favorite stock tickers? This is not that, okay? We're not going to dive into whether I prefer ETFs or mutual funds or whether you should get a whole life policy or a term life policy. That's not what we're talking about here today, okay? So we're just here to cover some basic habits that are applicable to everyone. Here's the goal from a practical standpoint that I want to start with to help paint a picture for us. Our goal, and this could be for everyone across any spectrum, our goal is to practice daily habits that create financial margin. I underlined the 3 key words in that phrase. Practice daily habits that create financial margin. Margin is the space that you have between what you're coming in and what is going out. Okay? And we want a large margin, not a reverse margin. We want a large margin between what your income is and what's going out so that you have a space to save, to give, and to continue to prioritize things that help you move towards a healthy financial picture. Okay? So that margin is really important, and we're going to talk about how to do that on the top line and the bottom line, meaning this is not just going to be about a BuzzFeed quiz on 10 things you need to cut out of your life to stop having fun and not spend your money on so you can save. That's not this. There are ways that you can do that by growing your income as well, equally if not more important. So we'll kind of talk about the spectrum of those things, but we want to create financial margin. Really, really important concept. In order to do so, we're going to need habits in our life. We're going to need habits. We'll talk about those in just a second. And we're going to need to practice those habits. So this is not something that here, I'll say it like this. We were in a leadership training seminar with none other than John Maxwell. Yes, I'm name dropping. It was so cool. But we were in a leadership training with Laura's work with John Maxwell, and he was teaching us this concept of consistency, and he said, think of something that you really want. Think of a future that's really exciting to you. Perhaps it's a goal, it's where you want to be. In this context, it might be a financial picture of where you might want to be. A lot of us have that, or we see someone else who are like, yes, I like that. That's where I want to be with my finances. And so John Maxwell called these uphill goals. And if I have pit stains, I'm sorry. But he said we have these uphill goals. We look up, we're like, that is the place that I would love to be at. But the problem is we have downhill habits. Okay, so we have these uphill goals and we have these downhill habits. And our downhill habits do not support the uphill goals that we want and that we see and that we aspire to. And the challenge is you do not default into uphill habits. Okay? You default into downhill habits. So if you want to have an uphill goal, you have to practice uphill habits. So we're going to talk about some uphill habits here today. I want to get this like a little one-word analogy or picture that might help you out here in conceptualizing this. I have an uphill habit of having my lawn look like the best lawn in La Cima. Not really, but like, but that's my uphill goal. Yeah, thank you. An uphill goal of having my yard like the greenest grass and like my children just running barefoot in the luscious, basically like Kissing Tree Golf Course moved to my backyard. This is my uphill goal, okay? So I drive around my neighborhood. I'm like, oh, I love this. And there's this one guy near our mailbox, it's a walk-to our mailbox. There's one guy who has impeccable grass, okay? And I walk by it every day, and I'm like, lawn goals. This is my lawn goal, okay? This is classic suburban dad stuff. So if you're not there, if you're not vibing with this analogy, maybe one day you will.
I'm right there with you, Mark.
Okay, all my suburban dads are like, these uphill lawn goals, okay? So I walk by this guy's house regularly. I see his lawn all the time. I'm like, this guy, man, what's he doing? He has a killer lawn. And so one day he's out, and I'm not shy. And so I'm like, excuse me, sir. He's kind of like in his garage. I'm like, excuse me? I'm trying to get his attention. I'm like, hey, I walk by your lawn every day. You have an incredible looking yard. Like, I need to know your secrets of what you are doing on your yard because it is so good. It is so nice, and I would like my yard to look like this. And so he's like, sure, no problem, man. Happy to tell you what I do. And so I got my phone notes out, and I'm ready to take this down and follow this plan. And so, I get ready, I'm really excited, and the first thing he goes is like, well, I fertilized my yard kind of around these times. I'm like, okay, well, I know fertilize your yard. Like, everyone knows you're supposed to do this. Okay, nothing special there. And then he's like, and then I water my yard. Water my yard, okay? I'm like waiting for the hot lawn tips here that this guy's going to drop me. And then he's like, okay, and then here's the secret. I'm like, oh, this is about to get juicy. Here's what I need to do. And he goes, here's the secret. I mow it every 4 to 6 days. Wow. And I was like, come again? He's like, yeah, you got to mow it every 4 to 6 days. Gave me a brief little grass lesson about Bermuda, and I'm not going to give that brief little lesson to you. But the point is, the greenness stays kind of at the top, and if you let it grow too long for cutting, you're going to cut off the green, it's going to go to brown, and then you're not going to have a healthy lawn. So he goes, I cut it every 4 to 6 days. And I was like, but I have 3 kids. Like, I can't. What about if I cut it like every 14 to 21 days? I'm like, how about that plan? He's like, you gotta cut it every 4 to 6 days. And I think that is a good way of conceptualizing sometimes our money habits. Like, we have these uphill goals of really great looking finances, but we're not willing to cut the lawn every 4 to 6 days to get there. Okay? And in order for us to get to these uphill goals, there's going to need to be some consistency in how we cut the lawn every 4 to 6 days and implementing some habits that are going to lead to where we want to be, are going to lead to life like we talked about earlier, that are practices that will lead to wise financial stewardship that may seem like, man, this is really something when we get started. And I want to acknowledge that. Like, it might felt like a lot to me to mow every 4 to 6 days, but the results speak for themselves, okay? So, we're going to talk about some of these habits. Please don't get discouraged by any of them if you're like, I'm not even at step 1 here, or I'm not as consistent as I would like to be. That's okay. Remember, these are directional things that we're pursuing, so it's not like a all or nothing sort of thing. And then the last caveat I did want to give to everyone here, please no one mention the score of the Baylor basketball game that I am being here for. The Lord will zero out your bank account if you tell me that score before I have time to watch that game tonight, okay? So
He is probably let know of earthly treasure.
yeah, do not tell me the score of the Baylor game. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get going to, we got 4 habits here that we're going to talk about. The first habit is visualizing a goal. Okay, this is, again, none of this is going to be earth-shattering. This is fertilize your yard, water your yard. But visualizing a goal is really important. What is something? Having an uphill goal is great. It's not a bad thing. It's actually very encouraged to have a picture of where you want to go. Because if you don't have that picture of where you want to go and where you want to be, how will you know how to build habits that support that? You'll just be a little aimless in terms of what you're doing with your finances. And so, what is a goal for you at your stage? That could be getting out of debt. That's a great, not being a slave to the lender, as we read earlier and we talked about a little bit earlier. That could be a really good debt and a goal to work towards. Could be owning a home, and you're ready to take that step, being a homeowner. That's a really good goal. These goals help make habits really tangible. And when you have something that you're working towards, it's I'm willing to put the work in on that habit in order to get to this goal. It helps you conceptualize what that next stage is and is going to look like. Owning a home could be something like that. It could just be, every time someone talks about generosity, I feel uncomfortable, I want to do more, but I don't know how. I'm not sure I have that in my budget to do. I just want to feel more free to be able to support my missionary friends, to be able to give to my church. And when we talk about that, it's just uncomfortable for me. That could be a great goal to work towards. To try to say, I want to revamp my financial habits in order to be able to get to that place where I am comfortable. I can say a comfortable yes to someone and joyfully give, not begrudgingly give. Making more memories with your family, retirement, and that picture. There's all kinds of things. Each person can conceptualize what a different goal could look like. And we talk about goal setting and short and long and whatever. But just having a goal of where you're going to start from is really fantastic. It's really, really helpful. And if you're married, that goal, I'll just say it bluntly, that needs to be a shared goal. For the two of you. Not a his and hers goal. That needs to be a goal that you share between the two of you, something that you're working towards together. Likely, you come from different financial backgrounds, different financial practices, different ways that you conceptualize, different things that you value, both in terms of how you spend your money. And so, having a shared uphill goal with your spouse is so critical for both of you to be able to sacrifice, potentially, the things that you individually like to work towards a common good and goal together. You need to be on that same page, in that same picture with what that goal is together. So if you're married, that's definitely, if you aren't, then log that one away for later, because that's going to be really, really crucial in terms of something that you're working towards. So, not much more to be said. I would hope that everyone can kind of leave here. Maybe you already have that goal in mind. Maybe you're yeah, it would be good to set up that kind of goal of maybe it's a next milestone or a checkpoint. It doesn't have to be at the end of my life I want to have, no. Just what's the next reasonable milestone or checkpoint for you that you can work towards and set habits up to help you get to that point. It's great. Okay? If you have any, well, we're gonna have a big Q&A time at the end, so unless you have a pressing question, let's save those for the end. Habit number 2 would be following a strategy. Okay, so you can have a goal, but knowing how to get there and what steps to employ in order to be able to do that is really critical. Okay, so for all the jokes and the flack that Dave Ramsey gets, the guy has helped more people get out of debt and build safe, consistent wealth than anyone in America. Okay, he's got a great system. Whether you listen to YouTube sound bites or not, take your choose, but like overall, from a general philosophy standpoint, the guy loves the Lord, and he has a good system for helping know what's the next financial step that I could take. Little milestones along the way to sort of check off. It's a great strategy bit. I would, Chris would say, I would commend the book Total Money Makeover to you. That's a good, that kind of lays out his whole thought process and plan that we're going to like very briefly cover here. But I'm going to highlight kind of what his strategy looks like for moving to point A all the way to point B, so you can get a picture of what moving through these steps can help you progress towards to create financial margin and have a healthy financial future. So his strategy looks like this. The first step of the baby steps, if you've heard of the baby steps or if you've been a part of Sling with Baby, it's very new to you, but the Dave Ramsey baby steps start with saving up $1,000 to have as an emergency fund. This is like, if anything happens, we're not trying to go in debt because we got to buy a tank of gas to get somewhere to somewhere. Like, this is just a good, safe starting amount to have in the bank in order to be able to cover basic expenses if anything pops up. Okay? So that's like the starting point. And the baby steps teach that we focus all our efforts on one step till we accomplish that step, and then we move on to the next step. Okay? Well, there are a couple of simultaneous steps in the later stages. But to start, we're not doing baby steps 1, 2, and 5 simultaneously. We're focusing our attention, our resources, and our effort. One step, the next step of our strategy here, and then we're going to move on to the next step. So that's really, really important, especially as you're visualizing a goal that you might want. Maybe one of these milestones here is like your next goal or something that you're really excited about that you can put down there. But having $1,000 saved up in the bank, if you have to dip into that, if you have an emergency, you want to build that back up to the $1,000 before continuing on with the next step. So we get this, we see how we progress from one to the next. Okay, the next step would be paying off all your debt, except for your mortgage. Okay, I'm not going to cover in detail, we're not going to go a lot into debt here specifically. We're trying to cover a broad range of things in a short-ish amount of time. I do agree with Chris, like specifically consumer debt can really rob you of the ability to create financial margin. It will rob you of the ability to be able to give generously. It's going to rob you of the ability to frankly create wealth. And so, I don't listen to a lot of like financial YouTubers or TikTokers or whoever is out and about these days, like sharing practical wisdom or not wisdom on financial things. But it's just proven that working your way out of debt, specifically consumer debt, is the pathway to building wealth and creating financial margin for you. So I guess we'll probably lump student loan debt in this bucket as well, basically any debt besides the mortgage. But this is something that is next step to work towards. There are ways, your table host will probably work with you on this, but the kind of ways to work through paying off your debt would typically to pay your smallest debt amounts off first. So this is what Dave calls the debt snowball. When you pay off if you have multiple things of debt, you pay off a small one first, and you start to feel the momentum. And then you can take all of that you've been paying, plus a little bit, and apply it to the next bit of debt. And then you pay that one off, and you work your way towards your biggest ones. This thing start to like snowball and help you out, and you feel the win. The big thing is you feel the win. We're not here for like 201, 301, or like, what my interest rates are bigger here. You feel the win when you pay something off and you get it out of your life. And so just get rid of what you can get rid of, and then start strategizing towards working towards some of those bigger things. And this will take discipline. Okay? This is probably the biggest area that takes discipline, because we are surrounded by the lies that we need more, we need to have. This is a thing that I require in order to be happy. You might have an income that looks different than the lifestyle that you're able to live because you're trying to get out of debt. And I would say that's great. That's really great if you're prioritizing financial health. Financial health doesn't look like this house, this car, these things, with an underlying foundation of debt, which is basically a horrible negative net worth to you, okay? That does not look like financial health. Financial health builds on top of a foundation of no debt. So if that's where you're at, we could talk more specifically about your table health, so I'm not going to dive into it. First off, I guess a qualifier here. If you're in that spot, this is not to shame or condemn anyone who's in that spot. Like, my goal is hopefully just to give you some practical next steps and the willingness to have people who care about you to work with you to help be alongside of you to take some of these next steps. What's done is done at this point, right? You can't go back and change that. You can't go back and change the past. What you can do is change what you do from this day forward and say, okay, I can make a strategy, I can make a plan, I can work towards this. I will also say this, feeling like you're the victim about the past or about something is not going to help progress you towards where you want to go. Like, victimization is a downhill habit, not an uphill habit to get you where you want to go. So you need to have the mindset that with the Lord, all things are possible. Like, this is within my control. I can manage this. I could do this. I could work this. I could be diligent and work towards these things. We ask God to bless those endeavors as we take steps towards stewarding the things that He's given to us wisely. So it is, God has given you the ability to control these things, and you should control them. Okay? That's my little dad chat with everyone for that specific topic. So, saving up $1,000, paying off all your debt. Once you do that, you should progress to having saving, grow that emergency savings from $1,000 to 3 to 6 months worth of your living expenses. Okay, you should be able to have that on hand. You lose your job. Something happens, you have a huge emergency, something comes up, like you need to have that bank of money that's not like, and I'm also dipping in this to like side invest and like, this seems really good. No, that needs to be your pot that's just like, I'm not touching this, it's safe, it's set away, and work towards having that amount as a security blanket in the case that life happens, and life happens when it comes to finances, okay? That's going to help protect you a lot. After that, we're moving towards investing up to 15% or more, but like investing 15% of your income into things like long-term retirements, things like your IRAs, your Roth IRAs, your company's 401k plans, things like that. So we're not here to get into the specifics on that. I love that stuff. I can chat about it all day. But we got to keep me honest on time here. Okay, so that would be next. Then we're moving on to things like investing in your kids' college funds. If that's that one, I kind of have some. Me and Dave would have some chats about that as it relates to the value of certain things, but that, along with paying off your house, are kind of like in the same stage. If you're there, you're investing, you're making wise next steps for your family in terms of what that looks like. You're working towards paying off your mortgage. All of these things in an effort to build financial margin so that you can live and give generously and more generously. You could say more yeses when people come to you and say, hey, I would love, or you can go to people like, I would love to bless you in this way. I would love to give more to my church. I would love to bless this friend. I would love to be that person that pays for other people's meals going out to eat. I would love to one day take my kids and their kids on family trips because I want to make those memories and spend that time and bless them in that way. When you put the baby steps in order and you start to prioritize and do the tough work, of those disciplines and habits that lead to financial margin, these are the uphill goals that you can get to. And that's where we want everyone here to get to. Like, we want the people of God to be so well resourced that they can give generously at any time to anything. Like, what an amazing vision of what we could accomplish together if we had those fiscal resources to be able to do that. But the onus is on each one of us to take those management steps to do with what the Lord has given to us what we can. So, also, this has popped up in my mind from a verse we read earlier in, was it 1st or 2nd Samuel? It's the Lord who gives poverty and wealth. So, what we're not saying is everyone's financial path and picture is going to look the same. We're certainly not making a proclamation about what's going to happen with your financial picture. We also, the Lord may incredibly bless some of you, your careers, your connections, in the way that the Lord knows and will. And for some of you, the Lord may bless you in many ways. The scriptures promise that we will be given everything that we need, but that might not look like rolling in the dough or what we might have as our goal. So I just want to say there might be different levels of what the Lord will give and ascribes us to. That shouldn't change our underlying joy or habits or the way that we prioritize our heart posture of generosity. You could be generous whether you have much or whether you have little, and be joyful in doing so. None of that changes. And I would say, even so, these habits are ones that are be very practical across any swath of next steps and career paths for anyone. I will pause there. Anyone have any questions or thoughts about any of that from having a habit of following a strategy? Having a goal is great, but knowing a picture of how to get there is very important. Any questions? Okay, if you do, write them down. We can have a group chat at the end, or we can just end our group Q&A early and take that to your table host conversation. Okay, habit 3 is building a budget, or this is how you enact your strategy. So if the top level is big picture vision of where I want to be, and the strategy is kind of conceptualizing the steps of how I can get to this big picture goal, your budget is where you go, this is how I can put the plan in action. This is where the rubber meets the road in terms of how I'm going to take my strategy and actually make it go and actually get there. So, budget, lots around this, but here's the very simple basics. Personal finances are not, they are simple, but it is hard to enact. So they're simple because it only requires basic math. If you have basic math skills, you can do a budget. It just requires a lot of personal discipline. It just requires a lot of mowing the grass every 4 to 6 days until that becomes a regular habit for you, right? So the concept of budgeting, it's not a hard concept to grasp. Everyone in here has the mental faculties to understand how to add up a budget. It's just the rubber meets the road and actually putting that into place when it comes to our spending habits. So ultimately, here's what we want. We want our income equal to or greater than the outputs of our spending, of our expenses. Mind-blowing concepts, right? We want to make more than what we spend, and that's going to create financial margin, okay? Like I said, this topic is not all about the 20 things you have to cut out of your life right now in order to have no fun the rest of your life. Actually, what's the fastest way to get margin in your budget?
Stop eating out.
That's a good one.
Easy.
The fastest way is to spend exactly what you're spending and make more money. Okay? That will immediately grow your margin if you just kept your expenses at the same level. So, for those of you who are considering, maybe you're in college, you're considering your career, you're considering next steps, keep those thoughts in mind. This is not a career building or growth seminar, but your income is important and will impact your budget significantly. And so thinking about what choices you make now that can lead to income outcomes is really important. What connections can you make? What career fields might you be interested in that can help lead you towards growing in your income? So those are great things. We're not going to, again, cover a ton about that right here, but when you're talking about a budget, the income factor is very important. And it might be a longer term controllable, but it is a controllable, right? It might not be, I can cut coffee out of my budget today and I'm going to see the effects of it. It might be, I need to start developing a skill. I need to start working on a connection. I need to start having a strategy for where I want my income to go and what could maybe get me there. That could help build some additional margin into my budget. So I just don't want to neglect that aspect of things. Think about that as you're thinking about your budget. It's not a bad thing. I don't know. I've seen this mentality where it's just like, well, I'm just gonna whatever the Lord's given me, He's given me, and I'm just gonna serve Him with all my time, and my career is. God's given different things to different people, which is true, but also it's given you the ability to create, to grow, to work, to cultivate. And so you could do that when you're thinking about your income and how to grow that. Not to the neglect of other things that the Lord has for you, and not out of the priority order of worshiping that over Him. But that's part of managing the resources that He's given you well, is to manage the gifts that He's given you, and you can grow that side of things. So, basics on budget, your income has got to be equal to or more than what you spend. Other things on budgets, we read it in Proverbs 3:9. The Lord should get your first fruits, okay? Not your leftovers when it comes to generosity, okay? The Lord is, Proverbs 3:9, honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Not with, do I have money left over to throw some change in the bucket at the end? Part of our strategy and part of our budget should be building in and prioritizing how we honor the Lord with what He's given to us, with our first fruits, not our leftovers. Okay? That should be a part of your budget.
Mark?
Yes. Yep.
I just share a quick story.
Yes.
Well, when I was growing up, when I started babysitting, and I was pretty young, about 8 or 9, my...
She had that budget for
My parents taught me that when I brought usually I made $1 an hour, something like that. Then if I made $1 that week, they taught me to take from that 10 cents. And back then we had little envelopes that we'd take to church. And then, so that was helping me and my brothers to learn to begin to give from your first fruits. Yep. Don't go spend that $1 and then, I don't have anything to take. And over the years, that helped me. Then as my money grew, because when I started teaching, my income was a little more than the $1. Then it just, that concept just went with me. And then the Lord may lead you sometimes, as He had me sometimes, to give up above that. It doesn't have to stay at that 10%. But it's, so with those of you who have children or are thinking of it, it's just something to talk to with them about it. And then as they grow up, it's not, doesn't become something, I cannot do that. Mm-hmm. It just fits your lifestyle.
So the Strong household had the old Jesus jar. That's what we called it, okay? So I was dropping money in the Jesus jar from whatever we made. I made $7 an hour.
Oh,
paying my dad's rent houses, okay? That's how I made my big money, okay? All right. So, thank you, Denise. Great share. So, Lord, get your first fruits. Next thing about a budget is you decide where your money is going to be spent, not it deciding for you. Okay, so budgeting is setting up guardrails around big categories of expenses, so where you know, this is what I spend on this is what I spend on this is what I spend on this, so you can assign your money where it's going to go each month, not it just deciding for you when you figure out, oh, I feel like I've overspent in these areas, and then you check your statement and you're like, oh gosh, things aren't looking good over here. You need to know where your money is coming in and out from. In a budget, savings is a priority. Let's call savings like margin, like building that margin in your budget to help decide what you are going to do with that gives you more freedom to be able to say, okay, this money is dedicated, or like this money is dedicated for these things, and now I have this leftover. What can I do with the leftovers that wasn't like given already, spent on regular expenses and things like that? We want to create habits of creating savings and working towards some of these goals. Like that might be your emergency fund of $1,000. That might be your emergency fund of 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. That savings money might be setting aside that 15% for investing. But we want to build that into our budget, not have it as an afterthought. We want to avoid credit cards when possible. There's really very little practical need for having a credit card. They do much more danger than what they than anything else. And so just avoid having credit cards. Use a debit card. Do something else where you see that money come in and out of your bank account. I'll just leave it at that. Like there's significant more danger in the option, the perceived option to just use it when you don't need it, then there is actual benefit to having one. So just use a debit card, go to Frost Bank, get a great debit card, and they'll help you out, okay? So that, and then as a part of your budget, I think one of the things that you're here to do tonight is to invite input from wise counselors on what those next steps look like. Past the first couple of baby steps, I still regularly like to call people and ask them, am I on track here? Here's what things are looking like for me this year. What could I be doing more to prioritize these things coming up in my life? Like, are these wise investments? I'm constantly trying to seek that input for people who are further down the path than me, and I would invite you to include that as a regular practice. Like, don't just make a budget, be like, yeah, this seems good to me. Show someone. Show your table host. If you don't have a budget, that's one of the things we're going to kind of walk away from with tonight is the tools and to start creating one. Don't just go home and make it and then go, well, I guess I'll start this now. Bring that back to your table host. Get their number. Talk through that with them so you can start to create some of that action plan and invite people into that process with you, because it can definitely be a process and it can be a bit intimidating, especially if it's your first time doing that or you're not oriented around numbers tracking and these sorts of habits. You'll want to invite people into that process with you that can help you, encourage you, and support you. So, building a budget is something your table host can talk about this with you. There's a kind of quick start budget worksheet on your table. This will be, for some of you may already have a budget, for some of you may not. That tool will be a great resource for you to get a budget started if you don't have one. And so after the quiz we'll take here at the end of this session here, then we will meet with the table hosts, and if that's the next step, you can begin working on that if you want to. But that's there as a resource for you to be able to use. I think it's a good starting point for a budget. And what I'll say about budgets is, especially if you don't have one already, they're constantly needing to be refined. Okay, so it's not like, well, here's my one and done. There will be misses in your first budget. And then you see what your expenses are, and you go, oh, those are my misses. I need to readjust these things, or I need to spend less in this category. Actually, I didn't realize I actually do need more in this budgeted category. And so what does that mean for the rest of things? Like, you're not going to get the perfect one on your first try. That's why we started out and said the goal is to practice these daily habits that could lead to financial margin. It's going to require some practice over and over. Do it with someone that can help you out doing that. I'll pause there. Any questions on that before we move to the last?
Do you have any more of the quick start budget sheets?
Yeah.
Yep.
Right here.
We got plenty right here.
Oh, could I have one? Thank you.
Yes.
Yep.
Did you?
Yes.
So, I mean, our college church right now is not a lot of college students, but when we've been around college students, something that we would get asked frequently is when their parents are like supporting their income and giving, you know, like do they give off of that money? I don't know if anyone has that question here or not. But like what you would advise for a college student if their parents are like supporting their rent or supporting their income and whatnot.
I'm gonna let the former college minister take that one.
Yeah, we kind of defer to like, hey, we want you to have this chat with your parents, but like if that is functionally your income, like if your parents do say we give you $1,000 a month and that covers a tenth of your rent in San Marcos and your gas, then like I think it is appropriate to go, well then that's my income. Like they expect me to be wise with my income, and so we would say, because for college students we're trying to cultivate, like we want you to honor your father and mother, so encourage them to have the chat with their parents. But if it is functionally income, we would say that it is appropriate to give off of that. Yeah. But
there's also a reality that
probably don't be the student that's like, dude, I've got a card from my parents, dinner's on me, you know, like that's probably dishonoring to your mother and father. And so
I would also say that there's probably a lot of people in the boat of earning their own income with extra jobs and things like that, especially at Texas State here. So yes, but that's a great practical question. We would also say, what does joyful generosity look like in other contexts of your life, where if you're full-time students, parents are floating some of that income for you? What does it look like to be very generous with your time, to serve other people, to mow someone's lawn like for free?
4 to 6 times.
4 to 6 days. 4 to 6 days.
Couple bucks an hour every 4 to 6 days.
Mark, you cover 2 and get somebody to get the other.
Yeah. But what would it look like to functionally use your gifts to serve the Lord and serve the body in a way that might be like, I don't know, that's how another way I'd be thinking about generosity in that context, but certainly financially have that chat with them.
Just a theological note on the you decide what money is spent, not it deciding for you. If you go back to the garden where God blesses Adam and Eve, and it says He's given us dominion over the earth, to subdue the earth and have dominion over it. We are robbed of God's good design when finances have dominion over us. And so when we're trapped financially, we don't have dominion over creation. It has dominion over us. And therefore, we're really robbed of being in God's good design as stewards and managers, because really, we're the ones being stewarded and managed instead of us stewarding and managing like creation.
That's right. Okay, great notes. The last habit would be tracking. Thank you. Tracking everything. And this is the habit that gets missed a lot. Like this is, you can have the best uphill goal, you can have a great strategy, you can have a good budget. If you aren't tracking it, it's worthless. Like you won't know what's happening with what's coming in, with what's going out. You won't know how your expenses are falling against the budget categories that you set. If you don't have a habit of regularly tracking what's coming in and what's going out, I'll say that's the number one killer of budgets. That's the number one killer of your financial strategy. That will be the I don't want to make it sound dramatic, but like if you're not following that in and out, and you're not making so much money that it doesn't matter, you're not going to be progressing to where you want to progress to. And so then it will leave you open to making mistakes financially, that you're like, oh, well, I thought I had this and then I didn't, it's because you didn't know and you weren't tracking it, and you don't know how, it will lead you to begrudging generosity because you won't know, well, do I have this money to give? Do I not? Well, I'll give it. Oh crap, now I'm feeling like I'm in a big financial pinch because I gave it. You just don't know what you don't know, and you'll be giving, you'll be living out of a place of like a lack of knowledge, of not knowing what's happening. So I can't stress enough, that really is the every 4 to 6 days trick of personal finance, is knowing what's coming in and what's coming out. A couple of the, I think there's a couple of great financial tools out there that can help you do that. I would, and we used for a long time personally, the Ramsey Solutions Every Dollar app is very, very helpful. Actually, on your budgeting worksheet, there's a little QR code on the back, and you could fill out your budget and then scan that and input your categories and start using that as a tracking device. Granted, there's paid tiers to that, so and you can just check my subscription link in the description down below. Just kidding, that I did not make any money off of that. I didn't have paid much money to Ramsey Solutions to help with that, but it is a cost that is worth it. And what it'll actually do is pull, you can link your accounts that you spend out of to it. It'll pull in all your expenditures down in a little section, and you could say, okay, I spend this Target run for this HEB run for this, this whatever for this, and you can start seeing how much did I eat out, how much did I spend on gas, how much did you have to be diligent about tracking. We call it putting your bubbles away. You got to go to your little bubbles, and you got to put them in your categories and check how you did. But that's a way that you could manage and then you can link your income so you can see what's coming in, what's going out, where did I end up at the end of each month. If you don't have a practice of doing that, I would say at a minimum mid-month and end of month. If you're getting started, I would say every week. This should be a practice of you to put away your financial little bubbles, check where you're at in your things so you know how much you have to spend. You need a lot of checking in and babying when you're first starting out, and then you start to get a little bit better at knowing where you're at and different things like that. But baby the tracking of these things. Do it every week. Pick a day of the week. This is my time where I'm going to check in with where things are at, and then do a month-end assessment of, okay, where did I overspend? Where did I underspend? Oh, I ended up with this much money. What can I do with that at the end of this month? I've already budgeted for generosity and savings. Could I save extra towards this uphill goal that I had? Is there a need around me that I can meet with this seemingly extra money that I have? You can start to decide what you do with that when you know what you have going on. So Every Dollar is a good tool for that. I personally now use a tool called Simplify by Quicken. It's a little bit cheaper and it does the trick. It also tracks what's coming in and coming out. The only downside is it's not as great on a it's not a great app. The app is a little less responsive. It's a little slow. I get a little frustrated. So it's great on a laptop if you end up using it there. But that's what either one of those tools. If you find something else that you want to use, so long as you're tracking what's going in and what's going out, you're doing all right. Okay. That wraps up those main habits. The main habits, as a recap: visualizing your goal. It's kind of like top level. Building a strategy. It's like the ladder rungs of how you're going to get to your goal. Building a budget is like the is like the engine to your strategy. That's what makes it all go. And then tracking everything is the only way that you'll be able to actually see whether or not your plan of attack and your strategy are working and how you're progressing towards those things. Those 4 habits are critical no matter what stage you are, whether you're playing t-ball or playing in the pros. Those are the basics all the way through. So, it's 6:46 right now. Do we have any overview questions? The evening wraps up at 7:30. We're going to give a little bit of break after I'll give some instructions on this quiz. But any questions for the group that you might want to add, or would you rather just chat with your table hosts?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
So when we tithe, we have the option to either like put it in online or set it up for automatic payment.
Yeah.
And I choose the automatic payment, but I wrestle with like, is this giving? Like, am I taking the time to actually give, or am I just being lazy? But I get paid like every other week, so I'm like, did I tithe this week? Did I not tithe this week? And then days go by and I end up missing it. So I came up with the solution, like, I think it's better to set it up on auto payment, and then every time I'm in church, I'm just like, thank you, Lord. Like, I just say a little prayer.
Yeah.
Are we cool with that? Like, am I good? Am I like doing something?
So cool.
Like, should I be more? I don't know. What do you think?
No, I think that's fantastic. I think having a plan for what giving your first fruits looks like is the most important, and then utilizing a tool like automation to help ensure that that is happening is very helpful. And so we've leveraged that in the past. We would, except for our income is sometimes commission related, so that could be different in terms of what we give monthly. But yeah, I would absolutely set that up as a practice, and then also set a practice of, we try to like talk to our kids about what generosity is enabling, or use other moments or opportunities to pray through or ask the Lord to bless those resources. That could be as simple as, and whenever we mention like giving at the end of the service as an act of worship, just like take a moment and thank the Lord for how that you're enacting that. But I think that is a better option and plan. It helps enable that first fruits approach to giving versus like, okay, like what do I have to give today? So I think that's great. Yes.
That's like something like my mom taught me too. But like, I don't know anything about finances, so I might sound stupid. But like, I know that like for some things you have to have like a credit score or like building credit score. So like, what would you say about that? Like for avoiding credit cards and like how do you build a credit score?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say Dave Ramsey would have more resources around that question. He would say a credit score is not a measure of financial health. It's a measure of like you doing more debt and paying off more debt. So like that's not like the system is sort of set up to be rigged in that way, where it's like measuring something that it really shouldn't. Also, he would say there are plenty of opportunities to do what you need to do with a 0 credit score, not having a credit score at all. And so I don't have the full scope of answers for you, but if you go down the rabbit hole of any like Dave Ramsey videos or articles on that, they would give you a great answer about credit scores and how you can work around that or not have to leverage that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hey, Ezra, there may be an option for your rent too, to have it reported as a credit. Like my apartment complex offers that as well, so you could do that without getting a credit card. That way it's getting reported as a line of credit.
I have a question, but I was going to just add some input to that. I know like when I was in college, one thing was like when it came to like building credit without having a credit card, you can have your rent report on your credit report. Also, if that lease is in your name, and you kind of go the Rams way, that's something you say, hey, look, this is something that like I can show that's in my name that I paid for. Same with my phone bill. One of the lessons I learned was, I was on my parents' like phone plan, and then I'd pay them every month, and then it's like I have no actual proof that I paid anything. But I could be like, well, look, I Venmo'd like my mom did. Yeah, it's not gonna like check the box for that. So having bills in your name, that's like another level of responsibility. But there are like programs that can kind of take those in lieu of that in certain cases.
Yeah, paying on time.
Yeah.
Another quick one for college kids. I used to be a bank teller when I was in college, and a quick, easy way to build your credit score is on your checking account, if you apply for overdraft protection, it's considered like revolving credit. And if you just spend a little bit on that, let's say 20 bucks, you go into your overdraft $20 and you pay that off at the end of the month because you know it's only 20 bucks. That counts as a positive credit every time you do that. So every month I would spend into the overdraft 20 bucks, 25 bucks and pay that off. And by the time I was 19, my credit score was 800. And the guys were offering to give me car loans, like for different cars that I shouldn't be getting in the first place. But that's a quick, easy way to build your credit up.
Yeah.
Kind of building on what Ezra asked, does paying for your student loan debt, does that build credit at all?
It's a good question. I think so. I
Can
think
you just repeat that question?
just paying for your student loan, like paying off your student loan regularly, does that like build your credit?
Yes.
When you pay it off?
Well, even just when you first got that first loan, it starts building that you show.
I do believe.
Yeah, if I can do just a quick personnel rundown, just for some life hackers in the room. Jiro works at Frost Bank, so talk with him about that. Eric helps manage a sizable budget at SMA. Trey is a ninja at negotiating what you get paid. And I say that as his boss. But Mark is an incredible cryptocurrency side hustler. But those are just a few key kind of resources in the room of life.
Undermine my whole everything riding on Bitcoin.
It's only a side hustle. And so those are just some people resources in the room as well.
Yes, Jane.
Okay, so when you're starting to work on your budget, how important is it that you go down to the cent that you're spending on like monthly reoccurring things? Like, would you round up to the dollar? Or what about like random, like they're not random, but your utility bills that adjust every single month? Would you round up and like your budget for that? Or calculate an average?
Yeah, if you know there's something that's an exact recurring amount, you can obviously go down to the whatever nth level that you want to of that.
37 cents.
But for things like you might need to, in the Every Dollar app, for example, you create your budget for the month and then you like copy it over into the next month. So the expenses will transfer, but you have the ability at the beginning of the month to go, okay, it's summer and my AC bill is going to be really high. I should adjust a little bit higher for electricity this month, and so you can kind of navigate that. I wouldn't be so concerned about the perfect exact amount as I would, are all the amounts in total equal or lesser to what my income is going to be so I can know what to do with that margin. It's very regular that Laura and I do not hit our exact budgeted amounts on stuff, but I have it set up to where there's some will hit a little bit more, some will hit a little bit less. It kind of, as my dad would say, it'll all come out in the wash, okay? So that's a good old phrase for you, yeah.
If you use Bank of America, you can go through the year and they do a monthly breakdown of your categories, so you can see utilities, eating out, all this and that, and it gives you a good visual of what you're actually spending, and to help you plan for like oh, I spend on average $500 a month on groceries, or I spend $1,000 a month at Starbucks. Like you can see that. You can see that with that Bank of America. Because I'm a credit card user, so I use all my points, and so I have them broken down where I can see where I'm spending. So that's a big direct app.
And could I, if I had a second, for anybody who's living more modestly, and I know that there are a few people that are living more modestly in this season of life than maybe you hope to in the next, if you are expecting greater spendings, end of tuition, end of semester, things like that, access your local resources like the food bank, because that would be a moment you look back on and say, wow, I'm so glad that I did that, foreseeing what was coming in these upcoming months. Now I'm not having to backtrack and end up building back what I've already made progress in.
Yeah. Thanks. Yes, Joe.
With just like budgeting and figuring out like, okay, what do I need for each month? Like, is it wise to go back like the past like 6 months and be like, okay, I'm writing down every single Mochas and Java's order I did. Like, I'm just putting it all like a rabbit hole of like, okay, this is all the places I didn't meet the mark in, and like how to create a better budget, or is it just like, okay, start fresh, it's all behind you?
Are you saying if you are trying to build a new budget moving forward?
Yeah.
Okay, I would probably go 1 month's worth of expenses back and say, okay, I would look at all the kind of the categories. I would use the categories breakdown from this little sheet over here and kind of add them up and go, okay, this is a lot. Like, this is my actuals from last month. Are these realistic? Is that kind of what I spend, on a monthly basis? And use that as, okay, I need to like trim this down or beef this up or keep this the same for the budget that I'm building to start. And then track and calculate everything moving forward to say, okay, now that I've put this budget cycle into practice for 1 month, I see you'll start to hone in like where you're at with groceries versus out to eat versus gas, and you'll start to see some like consistency once you do it month over month. Yes.
All right, last question, and we're going to transition.
When we're doing, so I know in tithes and offerings usually, I don't know exactly where the Bible says, but it's like 10%. Is that like every, like how does that get, like from every check or from like a total month, how does that work? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, the short answer on that is they was asking, where does 10% come from? The Old Testament, it's actually like, you got it's an entirely different world, right? So this was actual fruits, like here's my wheat, here's my lamb, here's my firstborn cow, That's not our world. And so I think the New Testament gets at several specific things. God is incredibly concerned about your heart. And so I think this goes to your question as well, Jody, of like what I hear in that is I want to be a faithful manager. Well, God's after your heart. Now, if you just ran that and you're not actually generous, it's just some automated obedience, but your heart isn't generous towards God, then you might want to change it. But so whether you do it every week, whether you do it once a month, some people will ask, like, is that before tax or after tax? It's like, what is this really about? So like, what I think for you, it is quite personal. Like, what is going to be the step in giving that's going to help cultivate your heart towards worship and generosity? If that's weekly, great. We do monthly. We just do a monthly auto draft from the account based on my annual salary. And that's what we've done. And so, yeah, I think that it is like up to you.
Yeah, if it's helpful to look at it on a per check basis and go, this came in, I'm going to give this out, great, you do that. If you want to wait, we usually calculate our stuff up, like what all has come in over the month, again, because ours is a little bit more variable, and then like, okay, this is what that percent looks like, we're going to give that. So, kind of.
Yeah, I guess probably for a lot of you, your income changes based on how many hours you work. My income is the same every month, and so that's helpful when you're budgeting. But for those of you working hourly jobs, that is a challenge. And so, yeah. Okay, we want to get to table hosts and our budget worksheet. Let's make it like a quick.
Here's what we'll do. You have this self-assessment.